Our next inductee is Bob Collett. Bob, of course, is not here. He passed away 35 years ago. His son is up here to represent Bob and his family today. But I've met people that have great stories that are not necessarily surrounding the National Hockey League. When you kind of live, whether it be the minor leagues or in this, it's always stories about pro. And it's the commitment with, other than just the personal gratification they get by helping others that makes it so special. Bob passed away 35 years ago. It was for him, according to talking to his family, all about making sure that through his efforts in hockey, kids had a chance to get into college. And I know there are a couple of people here today that without Bob's efforts never would have had a chance to have achieved what they did in college because of his efforts. Now, when Bob passed away, his three sons were 22, they were 19 and 13 years of age. So he had some young men in the family when he passed away. And to show you the impact that Bob had on the community, about an hour after he passed, and the funeral home is over at Bob's house, and they were out on the back porch and kind of talking about the funeral. And Bob's family said, no, we want to do something in lieu of flowers. And for Bob, of course, as you know, it was all about Webster hockey. Instead of saying, well, we'll give it to a heart association of this, they said, in lieu of flowers, if you want to make a donation, please make it to the Webster Hockey Association. Through the money that was raised on those donations when Bob passed away, they sent 3 kids to summer hockey school for 10 straight years. 3 kids a year for 10 years, and then after that 10 years, disperse the rest of the money to Webster Hockey. That's the impact that he had, and that's why we're proud to induct him into the St. Louis Amateur Hockey Hall of Fame.
My name is John Collett, and I'm a fan of my father's. I've been working on this thing for a few weeks, and it occurred to me, I have notes, that I should get it out a little while ago and look at it, and I started reading it. I thought, this is crap. This is going to be awful. I was playing in an old man's hockey tournament this summer and out at Chesterfield called the Puck Fest or something. And we're there for our first game, and who comes out but Bert? I went, oh no, not Bert. There was an old man's hockey game. We had old man referees. Obviously, we'd like to thank the committee. I would like to make a shout out over there to table 11, as Jerry did. I love everyone at that table. Only my brothers did Dad ever meet. They're all newcomers. All 3 of his grandchildren are here tonight. And my wife and Tom's wife and Bob's girlfriend are here. And, it's kind of weird. I remember my daughter one time when I was 4 saying, I'd really like to meet your dad. I said, I'd like you to also. But it's not going to happen. So it's very cool to be here tonight. I'd also like to do a shout out to the Friday morning hockey group. Bob Collett would be the happiest guy here tonight. He would be the life of the party. Now, he'd be 80-something, so it might, maybe not. There was nothing that he loved more than a party, and there was nothing more than he loved more than hockey people. And so he'd have been thrilled. He'd been absolutely thrilled to be sitting here with Lou Struckman and Mark Smith and Bob McElroy and Frank Farrar, who all had roots right back when it got started. Dad was passionate about everything he did. The Cub Scout troop, this is before hockey needed we're going to do Pinewood Derby, and they realized they had no track. So we're in the basement building a track. I said I wanted an HO train set. What I wanted was something to go around the Christmas tree that had one of those gates, up and down gate. Next thing you knew, we had plywood, we had mountains, we had everything. My parents had 3 sons. 2 at the time, but to get them out of the house, they built a rink in our backyard in Evanston. We started playing hockey, Evanston, Illinois, which is where Northwestern University is. We started with figure skates and brooms and tennis balls and picnic tables on their side. That's how Tom and I began playing hockey, and I'll tell you, that was a lot of fun. In 1964, Northwestern built a rink. He saw a thing in the Evanston Review that said they're going to start a league for boys, and he went to the meeting, and next thing you know, he's vice president of the Evanston Hockey Association. We lived there until we got that going. 1966, we came here. Now, there's going to be an all-star game here this summer, right? Baseball, that's bats and balls and stuff. The last time the all-star game was here was in July, first week of July, 1966. We had a new Busch Stadium right then. Casey Stengel said of St. Louis in July 1966 in the new stadium, it really holds the heat well. That's the week we moved to St. Louis. On the moving crew was a guy who was a guard at the old Winterland ice rink. We brought from Evanston the boards that had been built for our hockey rink outside, the boards, the nets, the stick. He said, "You guys play hockey?" "Yeah." "Well, I work up at Winterland." He hooked us up with Eddie Olson and Bill McKenna within a week of hitting St. Louis back in '66. Webster Groves had built their outdoor rink. It opened in October or November of 1966. Before that opened, Dad went up to City Hall and said, "I'd like to meet with the rink manager." He meets with the rink manager. She was a well-known figure skating teacher around town. If you remember the Webster rink, there were big glass windows right at the end of the rink where the warming house was. And he said to her, "We're going to start a hockey program." And she said, "There's not going to be any hockey here. We've got these windows. There won't be any hockey." And he said, "Well, actually, yeah, there will be. And we're going to be your biggest customers. We're going to buy more ice from you than anyone else you have." And he met a guy named Roy Rosen who crafted screens. And if you remember playing at Webster Rink, there were those screens that kept the things from breaking. Those teams were awful, those Webster teams. There's a picture out there of a Blues program that has a bunch of kids skating around in blue jeans and sweatpants and you know, no hockey equipment, just skates. That was the original motley crew of Webster Groves hockey. That picture was taken at the first practice ever. The St. Louis Braves were here then. Dad recruited Braves players Wayne Mackey, Doug Shelton, and Fred Stanfield to come out and help with practices. He was a student of the game. He hadn't played hockey, but he wanted to know how to teach it. He was passionate. How do I teach it? He got to know people. He became a friend of Bill Selman when Selman came to town. He would love to go out, you know, having the occasional pop with these hockey people, but when, you know, instead of just talking about the stuff that guys talk about, he'd say, "Well, how do you do that breakout? And how do you do this? And how do you forecheck?" and all that. We started a tournament. There was the first Pee Wee tournament was something he did here in town. A few years later, they started the Blue Flames, he and Dave Gardner from Laclede Gas. They wanted to get competition like the AAA's doing today and like that Pee Wee group that went to Montreal or Quebec, was to find a way to put these kids against competition that was better than them so that they could get seen and so that they could get into college. I want to say something about Webster's Pee Wees that first year. Not a very good team. That was 1966. In 1970, I was away at school and the phone rang one day. It was from Dad. And he said, "I got good news and bad news." And I said, "Well, what's the good news?" And he said, "We finally won a midget championship. We finally beat Eddie Olson's team. We killed them 6-0. Tom scored a couple goals. Al Tice did this. And, you know, this team couldn't get within 10 goals of that team when they were Pee-wees. And by midget, they'd won the city championship." And I said, "Well, Dad, what's the bad news?" He said, "Oh, my mom died today." But it wasn't a bad day. We beat Eddie's team. Maybe didn't come out so good, but it was a funny story. When Webster Groves started their high school team, they didn't participate the first couple of years. The first two coaches of Webster Groves high school team were Lou Struckman and Bob Collett. When he passed away in October of 1974, I had just gotten back from college, and the night before he died, he actually mapped to me the new Queenie rink had been built. He said, "This is the coolest thing. We got practice ice at Queenie, and look, I've mapped the route." You know, it was all about hockey and the proximity. When he died, I don't know if I'll make it through this, but it was the first time I saw grown men cry. He'd competed fiercely against Eddie Olson. I don't know why we picked Eddie as our guy, but the competition was fierce. Eddie Olson walks through the funeral room door, and my first thought was, this is not good, you know, because they yelled at each other and cussed and stuff. And Eddie comes up and he puts me in his arms and he just starts sobbing. The lesson that I learned from that was these guys fought hard, they played hard, they worked hard, they learned their hockey hard, and they loved each other. And it's great to be here tonight. Just one quick word about my mom. My mom did not share my father's passion for hockey. But I'll say this, and I love her and I miss her also. She loved her three boys, and she loved that we were into it. And all three of us are still involved in hockey. Bob helps coach the AAA Pee Wee team, and Tom is involved in hockey in Mecca, Minneapolis. And I still have Blues season tickets and bitch and moan about the Blues. Last thing, boys, come on up. We were proud of our dad. And Tom and I said to him one time, "How come you're the vice president of Webster Hockey instead of the president? How come you were the vice president of this instead of the president?" And here's a direct quote that Tom remembered. He said, "It's amazing what you can get done when you don't worry about who's getting the credit." I hope I've introduced you a little bit to Bob Collett. I miss him every single day. Thank you.
John, maybe one of the greatest testaments of a son is how you carry on the legacy of your father. That was well done. Congratulations.